Hi friends, and welcome to week 10 of Deeply Rooted. I hope this finds you well. In the gospel stories, Jesus instructs his disciples in the ways of God's kingdom. And as they journeyed along with Jesus, they would learn how to put much of his teaching into action. Their role was not only to watch Jesus heal and teach in hopes that some of the healing and miracle power would eventually rub off on them, but they were also called to exercise their faith and live in such a way that the message and power of Jesus would continue beyond Jesus' earthly ministry through their lives and through their actions. The disciples were not just spectators, they were meant to be engaged in the kingdom work as well. And this remains our collective calling some 2,000 years later. Our collective calling to live in the way of Christ so that the world each day begins to look more and more like God's kingdom, and that in some way, shape, or form, our lives might reflect the life of Jesus. Many of you were likely aware of this particular moment in the gospel stories. That is our primary reading for the week. And in it, Jesus washes the feet of his disciples as an act of service. When Jesus removes some of his attire, he grabs the basin of water and gets down on his knees. His disciples were really astonished and possibly a bit put off by what they were experiencing. It's simply not what they were expecting. The man they loved, the man they followed and revered, was going to wash their feet. And this was an act that was simply beneath Jesus. They believed he was way too important and way too great for such work to be done by his hands. But Jesus serves them in this way regardless of their feelings about whether or not they think Jesus should do this dirty task. And Jesus says to them after washing their feet, he says, "Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." Just as Jesus directed the disciples to be servants, Jesus calls on us to be servants as well. He calls us to wash people's feet. And he says that when we do it, we will be blessed by it. Now, I know what many of you are thinking. Jake, I hate feet. I don't want to wash people's feet. Feet stink. Feet look funny. And God knows that there's some people that really need to take a little bit more time and trim their nails. And I must say, I'm right there with you. Doing the dirty work of service, whether that's washing people's feet or picking up trash or doing some other unwanted activity, can really be kind of challenging and really off-putting. But here's what's really important for us to recognize. The way of Christ isn't about doing the things that are the easiest. The way of Christ is about doing the things that are transforming. And there are very few things in the Christian life as transforming as being a servant, as being a person willing to serve others lovingly and unconditionally, no matter what the need is, no matter how off-putting it might seem like. When we follow Jesus and we follow his lead in how we interact with the world, the love in our hearts begins to expand to such a degree that we see the people around us as people we should love. And our lives become shaped in such a way that we instinctively share love with our neighbors, with our coworkers, and even complete strangers. And because of that, service and being a servant becomes a natural response. And when love becomes our primary way of seeing the world, then being a servant to those around us becomes much easier and much more possible, even when we are confronted with the things we think are beneath us. I'm reminded today of a story from the book Tattoos on the Heart by Father Greg Boyle. It's one of my absolute favorite books. When he was the pastor of Dolores Mission Church in Los Angeles, the church became a shelter for undocumented immigrants that were seeking sanctuary from a recent immigration reform law that had just passed. Now, as you can imagine, having 100 migrant workers sleeping in church pews each night would soon give way to a certain smell that no amount of air freshener or candles could completely cover, or at least so Father Greg describes. And the congregation began to make complaints about the smell and how it was getting in the way of their worship time. And hearing these rumblings, Father Greg made the decision to actually bring it up during church. And this is how the dialogue went. And this is, coming from the book. That's what he says. It says, the smell was never overwhelming, just undeniably there. And the Jesuits figured that if we can't fix it, then we'll feature it. So we determined to address the discontent in our homilies one Sunday. Homilies were often dialogic in those days, so one day I began with the question, what's the church smell like? People are mortified. Eye contact ceases. Women are searching inside their purses, for they know not what. Come on now, I throw back at them. What's the church smell like? Huela a patas, smells like feet, Don Raphael booms out. He was old and never cared what people thought. Excellent. But why does it smell like feet? Because many homeless men slept here last night, said a woman. Well, why do we let that happen here? Es nuestro compromiso. It's what we've committed to do, says another. Well, why would anyone commit to do that? Porque es lo que haría Jesús. It's what Jesus would do. Well then, what's the church smell like now? And a man stands and bellows, Huele a nuestro compromiso. It smells like commitment. The place cheers. Guadalupe waves her arms wildly. Huela a rosas, smells like roses. And the packed church roars with laughter and a newfound kinship that embraced someone else's odor as their own. The stink in the church hadn't changed, only how the folks saw it. The people at Dolores Mission had come to embody Wendell Berry's injunction, you have to be able to imagine lives that are not yours. You know what, friends? If Jesus can wash the feet of his disciples as a servant, you know what that means? That means that all acts of service are on the table for us, even the ones that we think are off-putting or beneath us. So maybe if we're in a space where we know we need to serve, but we're not particularly feeling that way, instead of being repelled at the possibility of stinky feet or doing something we don't want to do, we instead see it as an opportunity to do what Jesus did. Because when we do that, Jesus says, we'll be blessed by it. And so, friends, I pray that each of you may find ways in your life, in your workplaces, in your schools, in your families, to be a servant. And I hope you have a great week. Peace be with you, and I'll see you next week.